In this video we are going to look at adding validation to a database. We're going to look at using a variety of validation rules. Remember, validation is the process of creating a set of rules which will control what can or cannot be entered into your database's data. So when you've built all your fields, you need to control what values are acceptable and which values aren't. So you can see from my database here that I've made a simple database for a phone shop, and the fields I've already set up. So the phone, the manufacturer, the storage, the condition the phone's in, the IMEI number, which is like a unique number for each phone, launch date, when it was released, and the price. Now what I'm going to do is go through each type of validation, and what you might want to do is stop the video at different points just to make sure that you are able to keep up and try the validation that I show on your own database. So the first thing we're going to look at is something called a presence check. So a presence check is useful if you want to make sure that somebody cannot put blank data into a database. So if, for instance, I've got a field here called phone, I don't really want somebody to be able to put nothing in. I need them to be able to force them to put the name of the phone in. So I need to be in design view. You need to make sure your table's saved. Go into design view. When you're in design view, there are your fields, and at the bottom this is the part where we can add our validation rules. So the presence check is the easiest one to do. If you notice here at the bottom in my field properties, let's just choose phone for the moment. Phone is short text. It's a short text field, and it says at the bottom required, no, allow zero length, yes. So it means it's not required, and I can just enter nothing if I want to. So what I'm going to do is change that. I'm going to just click on here, and it gives me an option to go to yes. So now it is required, and zero length, the option is now no. So I cannot put blank data into that field now. It will make me put something. I can also determine how big the field has to be as well, how much data has to go into it. So let's just save that, click the save icon. I'll tell you the rules have changed. I'll tell you that some data might not meet the rules. Well, let's have a look and see what's happened. So if I for instance delete phone, it tells me now you must enter a value in phone shop, so I can't have a blank value. So let's put iPhone 6 back again. Whatever it was, iPhone 6, no, it was iPhone 5S, wasn't it? So there we go. Now what I can also do, once I've set presence check, that's a presence check. You might want to pause the video now and go and add a presence check to the fields where you think you need that in your own database. The next thing I might want to do is actually control the length of the data that's entered, so how long a piece of data might be. So if we just look at the data in my database again, this is the IMEI field, and an IMEI number is always 15 characters long. It's not 14 or 16, it's always 15 characters long. So I want to really be able to set something up to control and make sure that that's 15 characters every time. So again, I go back into design view because I'm changing the structure of the database itself. Click on the right field, IMEI, and then what I want to do is go down to here. I've got the validation rule, and I can use a rule called len, which is to do with, which means length. So as you see, as I've typed it, it's popped up with that for me. It knows what I want to do. So I put len, put some round brackets, and then it wants me to put a string in. So I put a square bracket. The brackets bit is the tricky bit. I put the name of the field, IMEI, square bracket, close the bracket again, and I want the length to be 15, so just put equal 15. And that has now set a rule to mean the length of that field has to be 15. If you notice here, I'd actually already set the length to be 15 characters, but that would have meant a maximum. So you could have typed in 4 characters and it would have worked. This actually sets it to be 15 characters. So let's go back and see if that works. I go back into, let's save it. Yes, and then violates the rules, so I go back into datasheet view. So here's a field with some characters in. If I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, see, it doesn't let me put 5 characters in. it wants 15. So let's try and put 16 in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It actually doesn't physically let me do that. It makes me put 15 in. So now we've controlled the length of the amount of data we can put in, and we've controlled whether it has to be put in or not with the presence check. So another useful piece of validation to do is on fields like the condition field. You can see there's a range of values with people have typed in there excellent, good, excellent, immaculate, acceptable. And I've had to type those values in, and it would be much quicker and reduce the errors if I could just provide a drop-down list with that information. So again, I'm going back to design view, and I'm going to create a drop-down list with the options that I want. And that means that each time the user just has to click on the option and they can choose from the list. So I go back into design view, and condition is here. So I go short text, and I'm going to change that from short text to lookup wizard. And then this box pops up here, and I've got the option, this second one, I will type in the values I want. So all I do now is choose that option, click next, and I type a list of the options that I want to put in. So I'm going to give a range of options. So not working, poor, acceptable, good, very good. You can put as many or as few as you want. Excellent, and I'm just going to put one more, immaculate, and then next. I'm not going to give it a label. I want to limit, it says there, do you want to limit entries to the choices? So if I don't want them to be able to type anything else in, I click that. If I want them to be able to put more than one entry in, I click that, but in this instance I don't. It can only be one particular condition. So now I click finish, and it doesn't look like anything's happened there because it still says short text. But let's go and save the database and see what happens when we go back onto the data sheet. So here is my condition field, and if I click on here, you can now see that I've got a list of values, and that will ensure consistency each time. Much quicker, I'm sure you'll agree. It doesn't take long to set up. Okay, so again, you might want to pause the video now, go away, add that to your own work, and then come back and see what the next piece of validation is that you need to add. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to think about now is something called a range check. Now, a range check is something which we can use with a numeric field. So we want to see if a number that somebody's entered is within a given range. So that's useful if you were putting age in and you didn't want somebody to put in that they were 1,000 years old. On my example, I'm going to put the range check on price, because in my phone shop here, the cheapest phone is £100, and the most expensive they're going to sell at the top price is $550. So I don't really want to go outside of those values, and it's really easy to add this rule. I'm just going to go back into my design view again, and I'm going to go to the field I want, which is the price field, and again I click down in the rule box here, validation rule, and I set up my rule. So I want it to be a minimum of £100. So if it's minimum, it can be greater than, that's the sign for greater, or equal to, so greater or equal to, so it can be £100 or more, and it also has to be less than or equal to 550. Oops, in fact I've left out, haven't I, the 100 there, so that needs to go in. So greater or equal to 100 and less than equal to 550. So let's just check and see if that works. Again, it's told me the rules have changed. It says that some of the rules are violated. We're not worried about that. We're going to go back into the data sheet. So in here, I put a new phone. I want this phone to be 50 quid. It doesn't let me put 50 quid in. Let's go back up to here. Let's make it, it's a really expensive phone, £600. It doesn't let me do it. Let's change it to 550. That works. Now the important thing in that rule is to remember the greater than or equal to, because if the rule says it's got to be £100 is the cheapest phone, it means it can equal £100, and it can also be greater than that. So greater than or equal to is really important to remember for that rule. So far we've used a presence check, we've used a length check, we've used a range check, and we've used a lookup value. And the last kind of format where validation we're going to use is perhaps a slightly trickier one, which is called a input mask. So this is where we have a field like a date field here. So if I go back into the data sheet view, I've got a field where somebody can choose and enter a date, and it's not too difficult in access. But if we want to put we might want to specify exactly the format that the user has to use to enter data. This will make things easier for them. So we could also do this if it was a time field or certain text and number fields. We might want to actually tell the user the format that they need to use, which will make things easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user to enter the date as 3 sets of digits. So they don't have to enter 2014, they would enter 14. So what I'm going to do is go into design, and then I'm going to click on launch date is the field I want there, date time, and I'm going to click on input mask, and the 3 little dots there let me launch the menu, and it gives me some choices. You see already it's got things like, and there's one actually I already set up, time, medium time, date, short time. So I'm going to go edit list, and I'm going to make my own input mask. Okay, I'm going to delete this because it's already in there. So that's the view you'll see when you do this. So it says text unbound. So this is for, you can choose if it's going to be for a date time field or a text one. I want date time. The description is going to be phone date, and then I just use some characters to show how long, what the format I want. So I want it to be 2 characters, 2 characters, and 2 characters. So the 0, the number of digits, is the number of characters I'm allowed to enter. I don't need anything for place. I can choose to put the placeholder will just be, that's the character that appears, and some sample data. You can see now that that's popped up in there, and I just need to put an example date in. So I'm just going to put the first of the first 14. Okay, as an example. And then if I close that, and now you can see phone date is in there as an option, so I can choose that one, and I don't need to change it. It gives me a choice of character that I can make to appear to guide the user, and I'm just going to use the underscore. Oh, in fact, no, let's change it. Let's put the hashtag next and finish. So now when I go to my view and I go to data sheet, save the table, if I put date in there, you can see 3 hashtags appear, and that gives me the guidance that I need to put my data in. So that's an input mask, another really, really useful feature. And that's it really for the types of validation that you need to use. You're going to need to make choices when you do work about which type of validation that you're going to need to use, and you will need to understand what the possible rules would need to be, and you would need to decide what data is and isn't acceptable. So that would be your job to think of those things. But you can see that adding the validation is quite easy. The only final thing you might want to do is consider validation text. You've seen the error messages that have popped up. They're not always the most helpful error messages. So you could provide a message that's a little bit more user-friendly when somebody encounters it to show there's a problem. So if let's go back to the EMI, and I want a validation message that pops up to say must be 15 characters please. It's just a little bit more user-friendly and gives the user a clearer idea of perhaps what they've done wrong if they've entered the wrong kind of data. So save that. Let's go back into the data sheet. So let's try and break this field here. If I just put 5 in, and now you can see that my message has appeared, and that's a lot more obvious to the user. So if you need to watch any part of this video back to look at the different types of validation, I suggest that you do that. Now you need to have a go applying each one of those to a sample database, and then you'll need to remember these techniques when you do your own. Good luck.